Okay, and we are live for real. Apologies, guys. I got really excited, and time
That was
flies.
awesome.
Fun. So that was like the best. That was probably the most efficient Monday morning we've done so far. Basically, yeah.
You know what that was like? You ever see the show Far Out Space Nuts?
No, what is that?
So it's like an old Sid and Marty Krofft show from the 70s, and it's about these two idiots who are fixing a rocket, and like before a launch, and they decide it's Bob Denver from Gilligan's Island is one of the characters,
Okay.
and they're like, all right, well, let's take a break for lunch, and he hits a button, and it's launch, not lunch. And so the rocket takes off, and they end up in space for like forever, because he hits, I said lunch, not launch, was like the big line.
Right.
So we just launched the show into space,
right,
by mistake, because you hit a button by mistake, right?
I hit live, and then instead of, I didn't realize I hit live, so then I hit the live button again, which is really actually the end button. And you know what, StreamYard, I love you. You guys should sponsor us. But I have some critical, constructive criticism. And one of them is once you go live, you can't pause or anything, which is just kind of annoying. So I say this from a place of love. I use you for this show. We use you on Useful Idiots. I use you for the Katie Halper show. So really from a place of love, please change that. Please clap. Yeah.
Okay.
And everyone spread the word. Like everyone, if there are other people in that other chat, make sure that tell your fellow countrymen, country people, internationalists, make sure that they come over here.
But yeah, what she said.
Yeah, what she said. Yeah.
What Katie said.
What I said.
I didn't want to dehumanize you.
Oh, you didn't say what it said.
I know, but
they said or he said, yeah. Not
right.
that that's dehumanizing per se. It's just those are not my my pronouns. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's get to the Sunday morning shows, because that is our ostensible purpose here.
Purpose, and also apologies to everyone, not to silence Matt, but speaking of voicelessness, Matt had lost his voice, so we're behind. How do we say this? What we did was for those of you who basically are paying subscribers. Wow, dude, we have lots of stuff in store for you, because you didn't get anything last week except for knowing that you were helping Matt. What you got was knowing that
it was unconscious for 2 days.
Yeah, you helped Matt not kill. Basically, you saved all of you. Put your hands together you saved Matt's life, because if Matt had felt like he couldn't take that day off, he could have talked himself to death.
It could have happened. That was one eventuality. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you. That's your gift. And what we did for everyone else is we unlocked a very good episode with Adolph Reed, which is, I think, one of our best interviews, where he's tired of white people explaining racism to him. And we're going to talk about lots of good stuff. So stand by for
let's do Manchin Monday, as Where a Pilgrim aptly names it. We should start there, because that's the big topic of the week.
I'm just waiting for someone who said that I turned off my chat during a stream, which I didn't. His name is Eric. Eric. So if you're in the chat, I believe in you. I don't think you're a liar or a slanderer. So let me know what you meant when I turned off the chat. Okay.
All right. So let's start with the first clip here, which is Joe Manchin talking on ABC This Week.
And for those who don't know, for anyone watching who doesn't know, sorry, Matt, this is Monday morning, where we go over the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's listen in.
Mentioned the bipartisan infrastructure bill that has the support of Republican senators, but it's also drawn the opposition of progressives who don't think it should happen unless there's also progress on the bigger reconciliation bill. Here's a tweet last night from Senator Bernie Sanders, who's coming up on the program next. We're not going to build bridges just so our people can live under them. No infrastructure bill without the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. Are you concerned we're going to end up with nothing?
I just respectfully disagree with Bernie. I've never seen us in legislation. I never thought the purposes of the progress that we make in legislation was basically hold one hostage over the other. You have a bipartisan bill in the most toxic atmosphere that we've ever had politically. The president has pushed on this, and he says we're going to do this bipartisan. It's in the House right now. we could pass that one, and we can still go on to reconciliation. We can debate it. We can discuss it. We can have hearings on it. Make sure whatever we do it and do it right, and don't put more out there that's not needed, or basically put ourselves further in debt. We can have those discussions, but why would you hold something that's as needed as this, as far as the hard infrastructure, that's been basically neglected for 30 years, and just sit back and say, well, we can't do that? If you don't need bridges fixed or roads fixed in your state, I do in West Virginia. I need internet in West Virginia. I got water and sewage problems. I've got all the problems that we have addressed in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and that's the one that has the emergency.
So what's your bottom line? How long should the pause last, and what's the most you would accept in a final?
All right.
Okay, so that's a good place to start talking, because we got a couple of clips on this. A pause, so to speak. First of all, what are your initial thoughts about this?
Well, I mean,
I can guess, but go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I feel like I've overdosed. I've been dosed on Manchin, because he appeared on all these shows basically saying the same thing, which is that he wants a pause, refusing to say like what the deal breakers are, just saying he won't go beyond a certain number, and really just urging, like he seems to be kind of zen about it. Like he really wants people to take a pause. It reminds me kind of like of a mindfulness coach, you know what I mean? Like he really wants people to center themselves, be okay with the present, because if we look ahead, we miss what's happening now.
Yeah,
and
you have to live in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, look inward. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like we see him as a mindfulness coach, but not so much as a senator. What do you think?
Well, I take a different read on his zenness there, which is that he's completely at peace because he knows what's going to happen at the end of this situation. Look, there's some political realities that are going to come into play here. But for me, this whole thing is a script I feel like I've read 1,000 times before. Polls started to come out showing that Manchin's pause idea was popular. It's 6 in 10 voters say they like it, including 48% of Democrats. 64% of suburban voters say they like it. Suddenly there's been a spate of editorials about the 28 trillion. And so here's what always happens, or it feels like to me what always happens with situations like this is, sort of the Biden character will start off saying we want to do something new and like progressive and really help people, and then there's somebody like Manchin or Sinema or whoever starts saying that they're not going to vote for it. Then, as it happens, Biden's going through plummeting approval ratings right now, and that's being pointed out in the press too, which is going to be further ammo for people who want to say, well, he's going to end up having to cut this thing down because he needs to get something passed, get those approval numbers back up, and so they start out high. Then there's always going to be some talk. It'll end up being way lower, and there will be a variety of things that they will cite as reasons for why that is. But then from the other side, and Matt, if we could look at clip the 1C here, so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had some pretty strong words earlier in the week about what would happen if they don't get the full 3.5 trillion with everything that people like her and Bernie asked for. Could we see that clip?
Yes, nothing would give me more pleasure than to tank a billionaire dark money fossil fuel Exxon lobbyist drafted energy infrastructure bill if they come after our child care and climate priorities.
I thought the dog cameo was interesting there.
Yeah. Originally it was a dog. I thought it was a bag of groceries at first.
That's funny. And then Manchin also had a long, interesting dialogue with Dana Bash on State of the Union yesterday. And could we see that one also as well, Matt, before we get to the rest of this?
And he
Let's
also
talk
had
about the op-ed that you wrote. You said you cannot support the $3.5 trillion bill until you get, quote, greater clarity on why that amount is necessary. Most of your colleagues have been trying to give you that clarity over the past couple of weeks since you wrote that. Your party leader, Chuck Schumer, says he's moving, quote, full speed ahead with this package. Will he have your vote?
And that's fine. He can. He will not have my vote on 3.5, and Chuck knows that. And we've talked about this. We've already put out 5.4 trillion, and we've tried to help Americans in every way we possibly can. And a lot of the help that we put out there is still there, and it's going to run clear until next year, 2022. What's the urgency? What's the urgency that we have? It's not the same urgency that we have with the American Rescue Plan. We got that out the door quickly. That was about $2 billion, $2 trillion. And on top of that, all the things we've had with the CARES package, everything leading up to that. So we have done an awful lot, and there's still an awful lot of people that need help. But you have 11 million jobs that aren't filled right now. 8 million people are still unemployed. Something's not matching up. Don't you think we ought to hit the pause and find out the vulnerability that we have, Dana, right now? We don't know what happened with this COVID. It's awful coming back the way it is with a vengeance. We don't know about inflation. We know it's running rampant right now. I can tell you in West Virginia, inflation's running rampant. And on top of that, the challenges we're going to have, geopolitical challenges. Shouldn't we be prepared?
So I want to ask you about a lot of that, but are you saying...
This is funny because she kind of pushes back and unusually.
It's the timeline, both.
It's the urgency. Do we have the urgency to do what they're wanting to do in such a quick period of time?
She gets frustrated.
Can you be specific? Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about the dollar sign.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific number in mind?
Here's a number you should be getting to. First of all, I have agreed to get on to the reconciliation because that's the time for us to make financial adjustments and changes. I thought the 2017 tax code and tax law, the way it was changed, was very, very, very unfair, and it was weighted to the wealthy.
So what's the number?
And the bottom line is what the number would be what's going to be competitive in our tax code. I believe that the corporate rate should be at 25, not 21.
But what's the overall number for the budget bill?
I think that you're going to have to look at it and
keeps
find
asking.
out what you're able
She
to
doesn't
do
get
in
it.
a reasonable, responsible way.
So then
And
how
if
do you
that's
know
gonna
that
be
it's
at
not
1.5, if it's going to be at 1, 1.5, we don't know where it's going to be.
So you think
It's
ballpark
not
1,
going-
1.5?
It's not going to be at 3.5, I can assure you. But with that, whatever it is, once you have a competitive tax code that you can compete globally, and then you should look at what the need is. What's the urgency and the need that we have?
And I want to get to that, but just because this is the
can't give-
thing that people consume. Do you have a ceiling?
The thing that people
My
consume. I didn't
feeling
really
is
understand that.
the need of the American people, and for us to basically take in consideration.
All right, that's
inflation.
basically
No one's
that's her breaking point. So we can stop there. But she clearly is very upset because, as you say, like he won't identify either the number or the actual programs that he wants to cut. He just wants it lower. So, but I don't know. Did you have any other thoughts? Because I have a couple of things that I want.
No, I mean he does a similar thing to Chuck Todd, and he does a similar thing to who else? I think every other show he went on this week, which is basically he just kind of sits back, talks about pauses, asks why there's so much urgency, which I think is I would think is a bad talking point.
In the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think.
He doesn't seem to be getting bashed. I mean, that's because they don't have useful idiots.
Okay. To go completely devil's advocate on this, and I'm not saying
because we're talking about him, yeah.
If we're talking about urgency, one could argue that this is not like tuition-free community college is not an emergency measure. Universal pre-K. I mean, it's
no, but people are hurting.
See what I'm saying? Yeah, people are hurting, obviously, but there are some things in there that are like significant new reforms that aren't you wouldn't put them under the category of giving housing to people who after Katrina or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes, it's not that kind, but I still think that I agree with you. But things like that, it's easy. I don't know why this came into my head. It reminds me of kind of the way that dental care is dismissed when we're talking about medical care and health insurance, but you actually can die of an infected tooth. That's my metaphor today, and I'm sticking to it. But I mean, things like that, they're not as urgent. Like you're going to go out and, if a bridge collapses, you're dead. Or if you're homeless, you're homeless. But I do think that things like this, like what happens if you don't have the kindergarten for your kid?
Well, no, I'm not arguing that point at all. Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying, like just working through. I'm actually just thinking about this out loud. Like what does happen if you don't have, because things like that can break families, right? Or individuals or single parents. So if you don't have that, then, do you have to stay home from work? Can you lose your job? Do you just not have enough money? And then those, which I think then lead to those very more urgent things.
Well, right. Ultimately, it leads to wealthy people can have kids and other people can't, is what that leads to. Right. So because you just can't afford to have kids if you don't have a pretty elaborate system of childcare or places for kids to go after school, a lot of the stuff that's in this bill is designed to make it easier for people who are parents and don't have massive income streams. But what he's saying is, what's the urgency? Like, why do we have to address that enormous social problem at this exact moment?
Yeah.
However, but I still think that's
also in another, when he was talking to Chuck Todd, he was like, and they're never going to get rid of them once they're written in there.
Exactly.
Which is why people, which makes them good, of course, if you believe in government spending.
Right. But if you don't, then that's why he's sticking to it. And look,
dirty dude. Yeah.
And I think that's what about Albert Speer? So the subtext of all of this is the size of the spending package, right? And remember, initially there was this whole idea with the Biden administration that we're not going to worry about spending anymore because we're going to do it through the Fed and don't worry about it. But again, there were suddenly a whole bunch of stories last week. We had Kent Conrad, the senator from, I don't know, he's from one of the Dakotas. Is it South Dakota? Matt, can you look that up for me? Is that possible? And he was saying, like, you probably will have to shave this back some, talking about this bill. And then he said Biden has himself said that these things should be paid for. He has said that clearly, and he said it repeatedly, which is code for the party is not going to go for this Fed-based version of social programming spending. We're going to try to raise it through revenue, either by cuts or taxes or whatever. We're going to try to pay for all these programs. So they're going to go back to the old, sort of Obama era approach to dealing with rescue packages and stimulus packages, which is, we're worried about inflation, we're worried about how we're going to pay for this, et cetera, et cetera. Interestingly, in that same story, there was a quote from some former Pennsylvania Republican congressman named Ron Klink, who said there are other senators too that are just saying, wait, this is too much, this is too big, which is just a hint that there are more people in the caucus who are going to eventually not vote for this if it's this big. So to me, this is all just not taking a position on it. It's just all a signal that this is dead on arrival, and that it's eventually going to be nailed down. And probably the stuff that you want is the stuff that's going to be taken out, and the stuff that you would hate is the stuff that's going to be left in. Just my feeling on that. I don't know what you think. What you think?
Yeah, it's depressing how much you can just get away with saying nothing. I mean, I guess it's not this is not like a eureka or anything, but
yeah, I mean, this just feels like it feels like a script that we've been through before. The only difference is that we thought this was going to be different because remember there were all those stories at the beginning of the year saying, well, the Democrats have learned their lesson and they're no longer going to worry about reaching across the aisle, and they're no longer going to worry about spending in the traditional way, and now they're going back to this. Like there was a story in the Hill. Democrats see 3.5 trillion spending goal is slipping away, which to me means that somebody is already called this reporter and said it's already dead.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
They're not. I mean, it's going to be one of those things. It's like, isn't the point of having Biden and the Democratic Congress and Senate, like, isn't that the point of this, to be able to do stuff like this?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's theoretically, but that just tells you that deep down inside, they don't really, that's not the place they really want to be.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
The same thing with Obama. I mean, we all thought Obama was going to be X when he came in, and, his big stimulus plan turned out to be way lower than anybody thought, because he had Larry Summers whispering in his ear about inflation and everything.
Right.
But then it turned out also that Obama actually that was where he was ideologically. So
right. Yeah. I thought that maybe Biden would feel more pressure now than Biden, than Obama had. But yeah. I mean, how much could Schumer be disciplining Manchin right now?
But they're not. See, but again, I think this is all this is all a show for the media. Right. Like Manchin, they're trying to make Manchin into.
I know. Yes, he's useful in the same way that Republicans are usually useful.
Right. He's like, oh my God, look at Joe Manchin. He's the stick in the mud that's preventing all this progress. Right. In fact, they're all having beers together afterwards. Right. And Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin probably couldn't be tighter than, in reality. I mean, the real divide is between Bernie and everybody else. And, and a few other members of the Congress.
If he wanted to, right? Let's say if he wanted to, Schumer could use
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They could go to Manchin
because he's not going to lose anything, Manchin. So we got to go. Just doing some spitballing here. Let's bring it to Schumer. Bring it to Schumer, because he actually would be somewhat politically vulnerable to this, as opposed to Manchin, who's
right.
Big blue dog.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no. If they wanted to, they could go to Manchin and tell him we're going to take away programs X, Y, and Z, and your state is never going to get another dollar of federal highway spending or whatever it is. And, he would sit up and beg like everybody does, when they get disciplined. But that's not what the deal is. So, yeah.
So we need to discipline Manchin.
Right. So his road tour yesterday to me was just like it was a big, like, oh, everybody take a look at Joe Manchin stopping all this. Meanwhile, they probably already killed it in the background. So this is my take.
What's his name wants? Who is it? Who's the terrible super Grover Norquist?
Right. Right.
Which is what is it? Drown the federal government in the bathtub.
Did he want to drown it in the bathtub?
Yeah, definitely bathtub. Bathtub was definitely involved.
That sounds like something that only somebody who's drowned something in a bathtub before would say. It was
intense. Yeah, it was kind of specific. Yeah, very, very specific.
There was another thing that was interesting yesterday. Could we see this Saudi piece that you picked out, Katie?
That was interesting.
Yeah, I thought this was kind of fascinating.
We should actually read the report that they did release. We can do that for this week.
Yeah. So this is Face the Nation, so let's take a listen.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. Late last night, the FBI released a newly declassified document related to the investigation of the 9/11 terror attacks, outlining contacts that hijackers had with Saudi associates here in the U.S. It did not include any evidence that the Saudi government was complicit. Holly Williams is in Riyadh with a look at how that country is fighting against extremism.
This piece is amazing.
though, right?
At Al Haya prison, Saudi Arabia claims it's reforming convicted terrorists with music.
Look at the happy
Sports.
prisoners.
This is your coffee shop.
Yep, exactly.
And even a coffee shop the prisoners run themselves.
I want to go to
Our
prison.
guide was an inmate, Yasser Essam Hamdi, born a U.S. citizen to Saudi parents in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
I was there for 5 years, and it was very nice. It was a very nice experience.
Bizarrely, many inmates wore business suits during our visit, and others filmed us, they said, for the prison's TV station. Saudi officials accompanied us at all times and denied allegations of torture at the facility. After growing up mainly in Saudi Arabia, Hamdi told us
there's
he
no torture.
traveled
We
to
just play a lot of
Afghanistan to
pool.
train with the
Yeah.
Taliban just before the 9/11 attacks.
I watch action movies a lot, and I wanted like to have. I want to try. I want to try doing stuff like that.
He was captured, held in Guantanamo Bay and then U.S. military prisons before agreeing to give up his American citizenship and returning to Saudi Arabia a free man. He was later arrested by Saudi authorities.
This is what you
though
call
he
a
was vague
journalistically
about
balanced
why.
piece.
I've been trying
Right?
to
Yeah,
speak about it a lot.
hard-hitting,
Yeah.
Okay.
investigative.
But talking and stuff like that.
Who's
the reporter here again?
I came back.
I don't
to
know.
prison.
But Hamdi and several other prisoners were happy to describe their upbringing in an ultra-conservative, closed-off kingdom exposed to religious fundamentalism.
If you went looking for extremism,
Yeah.
if you went looking for fundamentalism,
Exactly. You can find them.
Exactly.
You can find them. You can learn from them, and they will misguide you.
The same
Yeah.
factors helped
Where do you think you could
radicalize
learn
the
from them?
15
Maybe from-
September 11th
okay.
hijackers who were Saudi citizens, according to some. And Saudi Arabia's
What do you
been
mean, according to
criticised for
some?
being slow to fix the problem. Now Saudi Arabia says it's reforming. Extremist preaching's been banned. Women have greater freedom than ever before, including
Look at how happy
finally
they
the right
are.
to drive. And school textbooks that once justified violence against non-Muslims have been rewritten. As Saudi Arabia
say
tries
what?
to rehabilitate its image and stamped out extremism, Yasser Essam Hamdi told us he's also been successfully reformed.
All people do mistakes. I did a mistake. I was an extremist once, but now I am not.
the Saudi government has always denied any involvement in the 9/11 attacks. This country has won praise for its efforts to combat terrorism, but is still widely criticized over its human rights record. Margaret.
Holly, thank you.
Okay. So by the way, people in the comments are saying like, prisoners learn from prisoners all the time. We're not so much, well, speaking for myself, it's not so much the content of what's happening in these prisons as it is that fact that this is just a total puff piece. I mean, I guess it is interesting what's happening in the prisons too, but like, what the hell is this? Like, this is like and now a word from our sponsors.
Well, no, exactly. I mean, I wasn't going to say this outright, but this is like advertorial, to the max, right? And everybody knows that countries pour money into every place they can, so that they can get coverage like this. They'll buy ads for things, they'll do sponsorship deals. When I first saw this, my first thought was to look at the lobbying numbers for Saudi Arabia over the last 5 years. Matt, if we could take a look at the open secrets data, there's a graph that I think is interesting. If we could take a look at that.
What do you mean, Matt? I thought it was just like, this is just, inspired by journalistic curiosity, getting to the truth. What does indeed happen in the Saudi jail?
Exactly.
So
here's just the legal. I think these are the FARA numbers, right? So the Foreign Agent Registration Act numbers. So if you're legally donating money as a foreign lobbyist, the total government spending is $2.4 million, and then the non-government Saudi spending is another 2.6. So let's just say $5 million of legal lobbying. But look at that graph. Isn't that an interesting spike in 2018? Do we remember what happened in 2018?
Oh, good times for certain Saudi journalists.
Exactly. That's the Khashoggi situation right there. So
sometimes you have to dismember a journalist, and when you do that,
of course,
you take a bump. You take a PR bump.
Right.
So what are you going to do? You gotta recalibrate.
Yeah, you just let's take 8 minutes of oil revenue and throw it at the United States sort of media complex and see if maybe we can turn around some of those frowns and turn them into smiles. I mean, this is just look. We can't say that this was a bought piece, but it's so shameless. Like what happens with these pieces is typically is that you get an invitation from a government to say, hey, we've really done. Or we really made a lot of changes. Would you like to take a tour of a jail? Would you like to do this or that? And so the journalists will get access to something that's unusual and visually interesting.
Right.
And so they will go to those places. I mean, I actually acted as a translator for CNN on one of these jaunts once. I went to a prison in Siberia. Fortunately, that was an ethical journalist who ended up turning around and writing about how fucked up the whole thing was, or talking about it. But the basic deal here is so transparent, right? Like on 9/11 of all days.
I wonder why. Well, because this report came out, right? And they are being, the world is kind of being reminded of the fact that the Saudis were flown out. Remember, like I actually rewatched Fahrenheit 9/11 on Friday because Moore was showing it again, like live streaming it, and did a Q&A after and had some really great guests on. And just remembering that they just, like, you couldn't take a flight. People could not fly. Ricky Martin couldn't fly. But somehow they were
unconscionable.
I know, right? Somehow they were able to fly out a bunch of bin Ladens, a bunch of people from the House of Saud.
Right.
Which, I mean, it was kind of incredible.
And if we were going to bomb anybody, look, Afghanistan was, a logical choice. I wouldn't say I would have done it. I was against it at the time, but there's logic in it because bin Laden was there, Al Qaeda was there, et cetera, et cetera. But the first in line for me should have been Saudi Arabia if you were thinking along those lines, because they had provided, financial and logistical support for a whole series of things that led to that disaster.
The bodies. The bodies.
The bodies.
The dudes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, like.
Not that either of us is actually advocating bombing. You may a trend you may have picked up on if you watch the show more than 5 minutes in, you'll probably get that.
Yeah, I think we may be the last people in American media who have a track record dating back to 2001 of not advocating bombing anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some exes, but like that's different.
Right. Yeah, but that was just an unbelievable piece to run, and there have been some others of that ilk in the last 5 years that were just as atrocious, that were about, something terrible happens in terms of atrocities in Yemen, and suddenly there'll be a puff piece about Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, there'll be some human rights concern or something like that, and then suddenly there's a puff piece about the UAE and all the progress they've made.
It's funny because it reminds me of Norman Finkelstein, friend of show, Norman Finkelstein, was on Democracy Now! Once and was asked to respond to I believe it was a Thomas Friedman profile of Mohammed bin Salman.
Oh, right. Yes. Right.
Thomas Friedman, right? I was confused him and David Brooks, but I think it was Thomas Friedman. Yeah, that's his lane.
That's right. Who was he comparing bin Salman to again? I forget.
But
we should look that up. Yeah, it was like Bobby Kennedy or something like that.
No, and he was like, I don't want to say anything because the kids here. He's referring to Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman's like, please don't curse because we are syndicated live radio. He's like, all right, well, that was that piece was a protracted blowjob.
Blowjob.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go back and look at that one because I remember that Friedman bin Salman thing. It's look, it's atrocious, and foreign reporters all know, because this is what their daily lives are like. You know, they sit around at a well, they used to sit around at you know, the actual offices of the place, but most of them are now just stringers in the area. But they're constantly given these little press releases by governments or people close to governments or think tanks or whatever, and they're giving invitations to go places. Do a story about this or that, and most of them decline because it's just so transparent. But that one was really bad.
I know.
So
they need to hire us to tell them how to do their own PR better.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia asked us to go do a happy story about their prison system, but we told them to fuck off. But that wasn't what happened. So let's move on to Justice Breyer. There were a couple of interesting things there. Matt, could we look at the first clip about his response about retirement?
I interviewed your colleague, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, back in 2012, and I want to play a clip from that interview. Take a look.
Will you time your retirement so that a more conservative president can appoint a like-minded justice?
I would not like to be replaced by someone who immediately sets about undoing everything that I've tried to do for 25 years, 26 years. Sure. But, I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you that. Unless you think I'm a fool.
Do you agree with Scalia that a justice who is unmindful of the politics of the president who replaces him, who's unmindful of that?
It's the theme of this show.
I don't intend to die on the court. I don't think I'll be there forever. But I've said a few of the considerations previously, and I think.
Do you think the consideration that Scalia mentioned, I don't want to be replaced by somebody who's going to undo everything that I've done?
That I've undo everything I've done?
Yeah.
I see the point, and probably in your background could be something. There are many considerations, many considerations.
This brings us to the calls for you to step down while a Democratic president and can appoint your successor, and a Democratic Senate can confirm your successor. Here's one example of that.
He makes his own decision about if he's going to retire, but if he's going to retire, it should be sooner rather than later if you are concerned about the court.
What do you think of those calls?
Well, I think that they're entitled to their opinion. I think and not only they understand the political world much better than I, or they understand it pretty well. And there we are. What else?
I think he should have said. I think Amy Klobuchar should stop telling that hair joke.
Increase the chances that a Republican Senate will be there to confirm your successor.
Well, I mean, there are factors. There are many factors. In fact, quite a few. And the role of the court and so forth is one of them. And
all right,
the situation.
And then there was another interesting clip that, of course, Aaron Rupar, the unofficial tweeter of the Democratic National Committee, but he had he tweeted out an interesting line from Breyer from the same, I think it was the same interview.
There's no.
Look at what Senator Mitch McConnell did. In 2016, he refuses to give Merrick Garland even a hearing in the 8 months before the election. And then in 2020, he pushes through Amy Coney Barrett in 1 month before the election. Doesn't that undercut the authority of the court?
I was confirmed, and I was nominated. And the confirmation process and the nomination process, well, I say, usually when you ask me about that, and people do, I say it's like asking for the recipe for chicken a la king from the point of view of the chicken. and I will say, that's a flip joke. But the truth of the joke is that's the political environment. Now, you may disapprove of it, I may disapprove of it, and if enough people in the public want it to change or be modified one way or the other, it will be.
Yeah, okay, so thoughts, Katie?
I mean, I like the chicken joke.
Yeah.
It was a good joke.
Is that his joke?
I don't know. Maybe it's like, who else do you think it's like he like secretly passed on?
No, I think it's probably like, one of those sort of standard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't even know what chicken a la king means, by the way. But it's interesting that he uses a la king and because it brings in the whole monarchy issue. And we're talking,
I guess,
right? We're talking. I mean, I think that's not obviously what he's doing, but he didn't say chicken francese or chicken parmesan, which are actually
Kiev.
Yeah, or Kiev. Well, of course you would think that, Matt. Of course you would think
that.
Right. But I mean, he's just covering. I mean, I don't know. He's just justifying, I guess, the Supreme Court, right? Not surprisingly.
Yeah, I mean,
and saying if you don't like it, you change it.
Right. I mean, first of all, why is this issue coming up again? Has he been talking about retirement?
Getting older.
Getting older. Okay, so he's just
every day he's on the court. It should be. I think it's relevant.
So okay, so he's getting older, so the clock is ticking, and so people want a younger person in there before 2024.
Or Biden expires as a president or a person.
Right. Well, Biden's not going to nominate a Republican in his place. It's going to be
right. That's why Dems want him to step down.
Right. Yeah. No. I know. What I'm saying is, yeah. Either way, they want him to. They want this taken care of before 2024. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting.
So unpopular and unappealing. They really need to have it done while Biden's.
I was just about to say is that. Maybe it's not just this story, but what I hear repeatedly is that there's just anxiety about 2024, and it's also part of the $3.5 trillion spending bill as well, which is it's not just that this is going to affect 2022. In the midterms, which everybody's worried about already, which is surprising to me a little bit. But there's real worry about 2024, even though, Biden relatively, I think he's surpassed my expectations in terms of how horrible he could have been.
He surpassed your expectations, like, given how horrible, you're not saying that your expectations of horribleness have been surpassed. You're saying given how horrible he could have been, you actually think he's done better than you thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think I even think they tried to do, a decent job on some things. Afghanistan was terrible. Clearly they made some mistakes on.
But it was good.
Right. Leaving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but politically, it's going to be a loser for him.
Politically, but your work. I mean, that's but that's in terms of like the morality or the ethics or of what he's done. Not. I mean, in terms of like, I think we agree that Afghanistan was the right thing to do. Has not been managed. I mean, how much of this? I think so much of this is just the way the media decided to report on it.
Well, yeah. There's that, and I think there's a couple of things going on with that. I think one is that there's the kind of, I don't know, if you want to call it the military-industrial complex. We already talked about this. I think they already recognized that the game was up in Afghanistan and that they had to leave at some point. However, they didn't want to do it now. They wanted to keep the gravy train rolling for a little bit longer. They were very glad to have a little bit of a pause last year after the Bountygate thing. They kind of extended the stay a little while longer. They wanted to pursue the middle strategy this summer, that whole thing. But I don't think there's anybody who really believes that the mission per se could be continued, for the long term. But they definitely want to punish anybody politically for withdrawing at all from any military engagement, just to set an example for next time, I think. Right. So Biden's going to take a lot of grief for doing, I think, what we both think is the right thing in leaving, or at least leaving as much as they have, right? Because they're gonna leave contractors there and do all kinds of other stuff, and but politically it's been a loser. But I'm also talking about the bills that they already passed in terms of spending and that kind of thing, which were a little bit more aggressive than I thought would have happened, coming into this administration. Like, I expected them to go straight back to full on neoliberal, sort of conservative, worried about spending limits, all that other stuff. And they didn't do that at first. So. Yeah,
they've done some spending.
Right.
But
But what we're seeing over and over again, and again, in this came out in this spending bill story, is this anxiety, like we have to worry about the suburbs, we have to worry about this and that, and it's because I think it's because they're worried that even whether it's Biden or especially if it's Kamala, that they have a problem in 2024.
Yes, big time.
Yeah.
Kamala's not liked.
No, has she been kind of absent from the news lately?
Kind of. She's like pulling like a Hillary during the general election type of thing, or Biden during the general.
Right. Right. She's like in a basement somewhere.
Yeah. Or standing behind Biden, kind of ready. She's often in that like pre-lunge position where you see she's like anticipating that he's going to fall over, or maybe that she's just going to run over and strangle him. But she's like forwards. It's interesting.
Accidentally fall onto his larynx, right?
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's a savvy position because it looks like you're prepping for either thing. Like you could just be prepping to save the dude if he falls over. But even actually in the course of saving him, you could wind up ripping out his larynx by accident.
Right. And what a terrible thing that would be.
I know.
Right? Yeah. All right. Yeah. There was one last thing I wanted to get to. We only have a few minutes here, I guess. And this was this week. There's so many good things. We're going to have to bring some of them up on this week. Yeah. Oh yeah, there were like, especially with regard to the 9/11 memorials.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff there. A lot. We're going to have to talk about. This is Margaret Brennan interviewing or sort of doing a repartee with I think it's Charlie DeGatta, or the reporter, who has a different sartorial strategy than some of our other war correspondents about the chaos after the Afghan withdrawal. Could we take a look at that first?
Intelligence is already acknowledging that the victory is inspiring jihadist propaganda. What are you hearing about how the chaos of this withdrawal will impact the U.S.?
Well, Margaret, we have to make clear right away the Taliban are claiming victory, and of course that's going to embolden jihadists in this region. It already has. The priority is in al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and here in Pakistan. We have to remember that almost everybody that we've spoken to here and in Afghanistan, including the outgoing Afghan government, if you want to call them that, said al-Qaeda is intrinsically linked with the Taliban. In terms of how Afghanistan is now, they are in trouble. I mean, there is a deep humanitarian crisis going on now. So they need an outreach. They need legitimacy from the United States and the international community. But if they don't get it, there are others that are willing to fill that void. I'm talking about players like Russia and China, who, if the Taliban don't play by the rules and an international standard, they're there to move in.
All right. So I don't know. What's your takeaway from this, first of all? Because I have a couple things, but.
Well, this is just one of the many ones talking about the increased threat from our pulling out.
Right.
Which
right.
I think like a theme that we're seeing, which again is, one of the things we didn't get a chance to look at this week was Chuck Todd constantly saying, but doesn't this mean about that? We didn't talk about the mandates, but I guess we'll talk about that on our show Wednesday, but our pre-taped. Doesn't this mean that we've been doing it wrong all the time up until now? It does mean we've been failing. And it's just like, well, okay, we have to find something to, yet another thing to make this look like the wrong thing, like the wrong decision.
Right. Like, oh, now that we've gone, look at the horrors that we're experiencing.
Yeah, right. None of which was under, part of a discussion when we were there. None of the horrors when we were there were ever brought up.
Yeah. We can look at a couple more of those in a second. But first of all, I just want to notice that if you notice at the very beginning of that clip, Margaret Brennan referred to U.S. intelligence says, which is like it's one of the awesome news cliches. And that was very beautifully parodied in the movie Team America. So I just thought we should look at that clip because it's a parody of moments exactly like that we just watched. So.
Doing our best to keep the world safe, Gary. But now somebody has supplied the terrorists with WMDs, and intelligence tells us they plan to use them. Isn't that right, intelligence?
That is affirmative.
Intelligence?
The most sophisticated computer in the world.
I have intercepted communications that several terrorist groups are being organized for one massive worldwide attack.
From what intelligence has gathered, it would be 9/11 times 100.
9/11 times 100? Jesus, that's...
Yes, 91,100.
Basically all the worst parts of the Bible.
So now you see why we need you. We will disguise you as a terrorist.
Who is that? Is that Phil Hartman?
Voice? No, it's Phil Hendry, I think is the name of it. It's a voice actor. But that whole what do you think, intelligence? Like they're doing that because a million anchor people have done that over the years. Like they don't specify what is U.S. intelligence.
Yeah.
Speaking of U.S. intelligence, there was another.
Whatever they're hearing from them is like they have to take it at face value.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's just this amorphous thing. There's no people we have to cite or anything like that. Right. There was another clip from coincidentally the former CIA director Michael Morrell. Could we see that one too? Because I think this gets more to what you were talking about.
Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of al-Qaeda, issued a video on the 20th anniversary of the attack. UN said in July he's living in Afghanistan. Is he?
I think so, which means that the Taliban is harboring Zawahiri today. The Taliban is harboring al-Qaeda today. And I think that's a very important point.
So is that just a complete false premise then to say that pulling out of Afghanistan, we can still keep the threat from al-Qaeda at bay?
We have a lot of work to do in order to do that, right? We have to figure out how we're going to collect intelligence, two types of intelligence, how we're going to make sure that al-Qaeda is not rebuilding its capabilities and is planning on attacking us again. And then we have to, if we do that, then we have to collect the kind of intelligence that gives you the precision you need to conduct strikes, right? Drones need to be told exactly where on the earth to go. What tells you that is precision intelligence. So a lot of work for the intelligence community to do here going forward.
Intelligence, precision intelligence. All right. Do you want to start? Because I have a couple of things on this one.
No, you go. You start.
So, first of all, this whole thing about al-Zawahiri still being in Afghanistan. I did a story a couple of years ago called "How to Survive America's Kill List," which was about drone attacks. And one of the sources for my story was this group in Britain called Reprieve, which does a lot of things. Like, among other things, they sort of agitate for people who are the victims of drone attacks. But they did this amazing study where they counted. They were the only people to notice that the United States was routinely reporting that they had killed certain terrorists multiple times. So there would be a press release that, sort of terrorist suspect X had been killed in a drone strike in Yemen, and then you would get a year later the same person was allegedly killed in Afghanistan, blah blah blah. But there is no one person that's produced more bodies than al-Zawahiri. I just want to read the sentence from that story. In one extreme case, the CIA reportedly killed 76 children and 29 adults solely in attacks targeting al-Qaeda member Ayman al-Zawahiri. So they have been trying to kill this guy and killing other people, mainly children.
It's a win-win.
Basically, it's a win-win. So now they're saying, so now here's Michael Morrell, who's one of the biggest jackasses in the world for a variety of reasons. He was going to be Hillary's CIA director if she won in 2016. He's essentially saying, "Oh, we really need to go back in there because we got to get this al-Zawahiri guy." Not that you've had 20 years to do it and didn't kill at least 76 kids on the way to do it because you have such precision intelligence, right?
Precision.
The degree to which that kind of stuff goes unchallenged when these guys go on the air is just like infuriating. All the myth making about our precision attack ability, nobody should believe it anymore. Like, we do things like when we drop that Moab, we'll do stuff like report no civilian casualties. Like, really? Like, how do you know? I mean, are you down there counting? Like,
yeah.
Of course that's a lie.
Right. Moab, if it's a mother of all bombs, then what are you doing? Like,
just
how's it
ridiculous.
working? Yeah. It really is ridiculous. And it's and that's still not, I mean, that's something that like nobody talks about, people don't know about. It's not reported on. What do they call people? Militants. There's never any real like proof of what that means. You got some
they're always militants. Yeah. They're always militants, right? And we don't know who these people are, right? Most of the time, because it's somebody pressing a button from 2,000 miles away. Right. At best, we're getting a video of a Hellfire missile hitting something, and it's ridiculous. And for them to go on television and say with a straight face that, oh yeah, we need to be back in there because otherwise we're not getting access to that perfect intelligence that's been allowing us to kill only bad people.
To not kill the person we've been going for and actually kill a lot of civilians. Yeah. What are we going to do now? Civilians are overrated, points out Light Rain.
I guess. So a lot of stuff. I don't know. Any final other thoughts?
Rolf Steiner says USA needs to be put on Nuremberg trial.
Yeah. I mean, the sheer numbers of people that have been killed just since 2001 is just like mind blowing. But there's not going to be a comeuppance for any of that stuff, I don't think. And this ties into something that I guess we'll talk about on the show later this week, which is that now we're rehabilitating George W. Bush.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
For a variety of reasons that are
mostly the art.
Right, mostly the art. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, his portrait of Pootie Poot is pretty great. Yeah. But we'll get to some of that stuff too. A lot of this ties in, but basically, infrastructure bill, reconciliation bill, more Afghanistan,
9/11,
9/11, yeah, and some other stuff. But we'll see you again later this week, and I promise I will not be hopefully sick this week.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Oh yeah, glad that you stumbled onto our chat too. And we had one question we didn't get to by Jess J. Matt, have you watched the Malice in the Palace documentary on Netflix?
I haven't. Is it really got
bag fans?
That
show is.
What is it? If I watch the Malice in the Palace doc and what?
On Netflix, found the news coverage of the players abhorrent. Also love dirtbag fans. What's the doc about?
The Malice in the Palace was this incident where a bunch of players went into the stands. They were really provoked, actually. They And then it ended badly. There were punches thrown. Fans got into melees with, enormous NBA basketball players, and it turned into a fiasco for the league. And a lot of players got a lot of negative publicity, but they were actually, in most of the cases, provoked. But of course, the players, if the players were going to be jumping into the stands every time they were provoked, you'd have that every single game. So, but I haven't seen Malice in the Palace. I would love to do that. That was an absolutely crazy episode in the history of sports, and I think it really affected a lot of those players' careers in a kind of a hugely negative way. So it'd be interesting to revisit that. Pistons Pacers, I think it was the game.
Of course it was. I was just going to tell you. How come you're leaving out Fire? Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in to Monday Morning, or Useful Idiots Monday Morning edition, and we will see you again. What's the gesture we saw from one of those anchors this week? It was like.
Well, there was the uterus from last week. There was.
Oh yeah.
Right to choose.
The right to choose.
Yeah.
So we will see you later this week. Is that?
We can get into mandates. Well, I guess we're going to talk about that this week.
Right. Yeah, mandates. We got to talk about that too. All right. Well, okay. So we'll see you later this week, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye, all. Don't forget to subscribe, usefulidiots.substack.com, usefulidiots.substack.com. Rate and review us on iTunes, subscribe to our YouTube, and subscribe to Useful Idiots at our Substack. Hit that like and share.